I think the people of Arizona have a right to pass their laws under the 10th Amendment. I think that it's clearly a result of the federal government's failure to secure our border and to enforce our laws.
Americans are right to be frustrated, including folks along border states. But the answer isn't to undermine fundamental principles that define us as a nation.
We're back here at the University of San Diego with Rosario Dawson and Sheriff Adrian Garcia, and we're also joined now by Mike Cutler, a longtime immigration enforcement agent who now works with the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington. We're going to go to our first email question. It's from Daniel Rojo, and Mike, you get this first email question, okay?
Sounds fair.
It's, what do we do with the illegals that are here now? Maybe ask it a few times if you don't get an answer. So,
well, there is an answer. And look, you're right. We're not going to lock up. And I think there's more than 12 million.
How many do you think?
Maybe 30 or more. Look, in
30, you could be double.
Maybe so. Maybe even, in 1986, we were told that there were 1 million illegals that would be given lawful status with the amnesty back then. We wound up with 4 million. If we're talking 11 or 12, God knows, we don't know. This is like trying to figure out the weight of a black hole. You can only do it by inference in terms of the impact on our society. But the problem is that immigration laws are designed to keep people out of the country whose presence is harmful. It's the way a homeowner looks through a peephole to make certain that he lets a stranger into the home that he trusts. And while we can't arrest all the illegal aliens who are present here, we can create an environment that is not conducive or encouraging. In fact, there's a section of law that says it's a felony to induce, encourage, aid, or abet. So what you do is, if you can't get a driver's license, if you can't get a job, if you can't open a bank account, then why would you remain? If you would sit in a restaurant and the owner came out and said, the power was off on the refrigerator, our food is spoiled, we can't serve you anything, you wouldn't stay in the restaurant very long. I think we need to create an environment that encourages lawful immigration. We certainly need it. I'm the son of an immigrant. My mother came from Poland ahead of the Holocaust. But the idea of having people come across the border, we don't know if they're simply looking to work. And if you look at the immigration laws, the laws of exclusion give categories, and among them are people who are violent felons, people involved with terrorism, people involved in human trafficking, human rights violations, war criminals. We don't know that if the guy that runs the border is simply looking to get a job because he's desperate or he's on the run.
Your answer to the question of what do you do with the 12 or more million that are here now illegally is you do nothing except try to get them to leave through these environmental
and you do arrest elements. Some. I mean, you don't get all the speeders that are speeding down the highway. In New York, we had a problem with drunk drivers. You started seizing cars. We didn't seize all the cars.
Sheriff Garcia, how does that sound to you?
Well, obviously, you have to make sure that you are providing public safety, that you are making sure that people understand that when you commit a crime, that there's consequences to it. That's the way we're doing it in Harris County. We're just not taking it to the extreme of the way other places do in terms of just trying to figure out who's walking down the street and what their status is. But rather, we're basing it on the fact that when someone commits a crime, we're checking them and we're cooperating with ICE, and we're having that kind of process. But also, public safety needs to have good information. That he needs to have a relationship and confidence of the community. Otherwise, it won't work.
Maria Teresa, what Mike's talking about, it sounds to me, is making things making life even more difficult than what the Arizona law is contemplating. What do you think the behavioral reaction would be with illegal?
With undocumented workers, I think the picture that Mr. Cutler is providing actually would devastate the United States economy, period. Because what we're talking about is individuals that are working in agriculture, in our health care. They're also working in our manufacturing. So to wipe them out doesn't really seem to be an option. But I do have a question for you. So sure. You've been working with the INS for the last 30 years, and you've seen what works and what doesn't. What would you change of our laws today if you could start all over? If the president and Congress came up to you and said, You have, Michael Cutler, with your experience of 30 years, how would you change our immigration laws today?
Well, actually, in some ways, Congress has done that. I've done about 15
But I'm asking, how would you do it?
Well, you need more manpower. First of all, if you think we're enforcing the immigration laws, we're not. We have about 3,000 ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents for the interior, dedicated to enforcing immigration law. New York has 35,000 police officers. The likelihood that an illegal alien will be able to get away with running our border or overstaying a visa or violating the terms of their admission is quite high. So what we really need to do is increase the likelihood that if you're here illegally, and by the way, you know, we let in 1.1 million lawful immigrants last year. They are on the pathway to U.S. citizenship. That's more than any other country on the planet.
So how would we fill the current jobs that undocumented people are doing if there's no Bracero program that his father was able to enjoy?
Well, let me tell you the problem to that. Number one, foreign workers have as a goal sending money out of the economy. Every year we lose between $100 to $200 billion that gets sent home by the people that work here. But here's the other problem.
But that means that their family is less likely to move here because they're actually having
not at all. They still want to come here. And in fact, if you legalize them, the family would come here. But the unscrupulous employers, now this is the thing no one ever talks about. The unscrupulous employer, as soon as that guy is legalized, and I saw it firsthand as an agent, will go to his boss with that magic card and say, I'll keep working for you, but not for $6 an hour. I want prevailing wage. And these are the list of other conditions that I'm entitled to because I'm legal. They were fired, and the next batch of illegals were hired, which is how we got here. What do we do with 20 million people who wind up losing their jobs? They will have brought their families here because comprehensive reform would allow it, and we wouldn't even know who they are. They would take any name they want. And meanwhile, you have wives and children here, the breadwinner out of work. They would wind up on welfare, unemployment. We have communities going bankrupt today. How do you pay for all this?
So would you...
Just a second. Rosario, what we're hearing from Mike is the strict enforcement school, and it seems to me it sounds a little bit like Arizona on steroids. Make it. No, but that is the law, though. What I want to get, Rosario, how do you think the population that's here, the illegal population, undocumented population that is here already, how do you think that they would react to the kinds of things Mike's talking about? Do you think we would see this mass migration back across the southern border of tens of millions of people because they can't get a checking account?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the reality is that we're talking about people born on one side of an imaginary line or another. People go where their livelihood can be the best. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of individuals who all decided to risk their lives and try to be an entrepreneur here in some way, shape, or form, work here, just to work. And that's where it gets really dangerous, because it'd be so easy to just go, well, all of you are illegal and you need to leave. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that and still stay humane? As SB 1070 is a law that makes us have to go around and point at people. Are you a criminal? No. Are you a criminal? How about you? It would be so much easier if people would just be honest in that way. But again, it is about the employers. It is about people who are encouraging people to come here just as much as the bad policies in their own countries that are affecting their livelihoods are driving them out. So as long as we're going to continue to encourage people to come here, as the same way that these same employers are also sending American jobs overseas. Like, this is a tremendous problem why we're here where we are. These employers are looking for cheap labor, and us Americans like to have things as cheap as possible. So if we try to combine the two is going to be really problematic. Either that means all of our costs are going to go up, and we're also going to lose all the tax money and that we're getting from all of the undocumented people who are here. Or, we get rid of all these people and we're just here and we keep them all here and we try to figure it all out. But what's going to happen with all the situation?
Go ahead. No, and I think part of what, Rosario, I think what you're saying is that we don't have a system now so that we can actually get the unskilled worker that we desperately need right now. So how do we actually create that pathway? Right.
We have a comment over there on microphone 1. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Craig Barkas. I'm a professor here at the University of San Diego. And this program began by people talking about bringing humanity to the debate. And I arrived here in San Diego from the Midwest, from Ohio in 1978. And I will tell you what my experience with people coming across the border has been. I will concede that there are issues of crime and people crossing the border illegally. But when I look around in San Diego, I see people who come from south of the border that are working very hard at difficult jobs that pay very little money. And it seems very difficult to bring humanity to the conversation when these people are demonized so readily? And how are we going to have true immigration reform when we in fact do demonize these people?
Rosario, what is the feeling in the Latino community about this point, the demonization? We saw a TV commercial run in the campaign in Nevada that was demonizing, showing images of these people running across the border. What is it like in that community when this kind of imagery is out there?
Well, I think that people who are especially running for election seem to forget that people can watch. If they're speaking in Spanish, then they're watching the Spanish, but they're also watching the English ads, and they're quite polarizing. You know, there's ads going out there saying don't vote at all. And Sheriff Arpaio had put out an email which he says that he wasn't actually attached to, but in Arizona, that email went out to 800,000 people to tell them that we had to stop them illegals from voting, and we had to make sure that they couldn't go to the polls. Everyone knows undocumented people can't vote, so what that just meant is voter intimidation. So I think what people are starting to see, and you're seeing it here with the backlash against Meg Whitman here in California, that people are paying attention to these issues. Now, Latinos are going to vote however they're going to vote. They're not a monolithic voting bloc. They're going to do whatever. But they are paying attention to these ads. They are seeing how they're being talked about. And especially people who have been here for generations and going, so if I'm here, I was here before the imaginary line crossed me and said that in American history here in Arizona. But you're telling me that just by looking at me, you can tell me I don't belong. People are going to get really upset, and that's why this conversation is going to get more and more convoluted as emotions get in the way of being able to get through and sift through the facts and get to a clear resolution.
It could not be more ironic that we're having this conversation in a spot that used to be Mexico.
Yes.
That we're gonna break. We're gonna break. When we come back, we're gonna get to politics. We're gonna get to the Latino vote. We're gonna get to more email questions. The Latino vote is changing American politics. We're gonna talk about that when we come back. Stay with us.